Hi, everybody. Today I'm going to record a one-on-one podcast talking about a recent conversation I had at a networking group that I joined last week. And it talked about, it was an older group of people, but it talked about how to lead the next generation or how this next generation, whether it be millennials or Generation Z, how to lead them and mentor them, especially in an environment where people aren't going to work at a physical location. Everybody's doing either hybrid or remote working. And I think we can all agree that though the convenience factor is there in terms of reducing traffic and travel to work, be able to be home for family, the professional development and the organic flow of building relationship with coworkers is lost. And so this group is lamenting or just thinking, how does this change in this new generation? And I want to talk a little bit about that because this is something that my company delves into leadership. And whenever you're leading, you not only just lead your peers, but you have to lead people that are generationally younger than you. And it has to be taken into consideration. So, what is leadership? I like to use John Maxwell's leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So, if you're influencing somebody, then you are being a leader. What I always like to start with in thinking about job or leadership or life or purpose is the five regrets of the dying. If you haven't heard about this, it's written by a palliative nurse named Bonnie Ware, I believe. She wrote an article in The Guardian like maybe 10, 15 years ago, and then wrote a book because it just exploded, went viral. And basically, what she talks about is she was a nurse taking care of about 3,000 to 5,000 patients who were end of term near the end of their life. So people that are above 70 or 80 years old maybe has maybe a month or two to live. And she would just ask these simple questions if there aren't any regrets in life. And these five, in one version or another, would always come up. So, what are these? You can look these up, but I'll tell you. Number one, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And number five, I wish that I had let myself be happier. So um, I think these are a great check because you're not 80 or 90 years old. You're not dying. We're currently, if you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s, or even if you're just still alive, you can just ask yourself, do we have any regrets? Is there anything that's going on that we will regret in the future? And I like to look at this and say, well, like number one, I had the courage in life to be true to myself, not what others expected of me. Well, in order to be true to yourself, you have to know yourself. I think this goes to part that people are trying to be safe and trying to meet other people's expectations. And if you don't really know what your passions are, or what your loves are, what your meaning is in life, then you're going to regret because you're always going to be doing stuff for other people and not living for yourself. So when we talk about this generation in terms of the Great Resignation, that's what it's called. That's ever since the pandemic, people are just left their jobs, and there's always these open jobs and workers in the trades or even in waitress and hospitality. There's all these open jobs. Is because people are asking themselves, am I doing something meaningful? Am I doing something that I want to enjoy? And I think a lot of the younger generation says that $15 an hour minimum wage is not worth the time. I'd rather be enjoying myself. Now, I can also argue the adverse effect of that is that getting a job and earning a living is one, you learn skill sets, and also earning a living also gives you freedom to purchase things that you might enjoy. But I think one explanations of why there was a great resignation and why people don't want to go up to work is because they want to live lives for themselves. And whether you like it a lot or not, there's always this tension of sacrificing living for other people or trying to live for yourself. And many people in this generation want to live for themselves, whether it's a good or bad thing. And the other part is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. So that's obvious. They're looking for working at a job that is meaningless. And I think this goes to the idea that people want to work for companies that align with their values. And So it's not about necessarily working so hard. It's just that working at a job that doesn't mean anything. And so if you're working for a job that just for money, then I would argue you probably want to look at other reasons why you're working at that job or find other reasons why this job is influential. I listened to a comedian how he was talking to a delivery driver, and they're asking about meaning and stuff like that. And delivery driver is like, I deliver stuff and blah blah blah. But eventually, after 5 minutes of talking, the delivery driver found meaning in his job by saying, "I make people's dreams come true by giving them what they need to make that happen." I mean, whether or not it hasn't changed the job, but he found how he could be an influence to other people's life and how he's influencing other people's life. So I think it's important to look at that. Is your job something that you find meaning to? And this generation wants to look at companies that align with their values. The other part is I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. Once again, I think this is the important part of knowing yourself and self-awareness. I always talk about. I've written some articles about that, blogs about that. I mean, the first stage of leadership is self-awareness, self-discovery. Because if you don't know yourself and you can't even lead yourself, how do you expect to lead other people? So I think this is critical in terms of not just leadership, but self-growth and not being controlled by your emotions. So I had a professor that once said, the less you know about your emotions, the more you'll be controlled by them. There are things that we are controlled by, whether it is a past life or things that we've been hurt from, and we have an emotional charge from, which some people may be triggered, and you are have some beliefs from that, and your actions will come from those beliefs. So many times you should be asking yourself, one, emotionally, why am I feeling this emotion? This is the first step of emotional awareness, EQ, increasing your EQ and self-awareness is why did I feel that way? Why am I doing something? And this process, I mean, you could look at all these different behavior assessments, and I love behavior assessments. I know like Myers-Briggs, Gallup Strengths, and those are great in terms of comparing yourself to other people in terms of a spectrum of whether you're an introvert, extrovert, and how you naturally feel in certain situations. But those are a broad stroke. They'll never get down to the minute details of you specifically, because each person is different. So I think the best way of emotional intelligence is asking your emotions and your actions why. Keep asking why. Just like a 5-year-old that asks questions why, until you get down to the root cause of what your beliefs are. And I think the best way to do that is writing a journal. At the end of the day, writing a journal and said, this is what I felt today, situation, some emotionally charged event. Why did I feel that way? Why I feel that? And you'll notice that when you write a journal, it takes like 1 to 5 minutes at the end of the day, just write about it. Just take that, and you'll find that some recurring themes will keep showing up, or you start noticing yourself do these things and your thought actions throughout the day. And maybe a week, maybe 3 weeks, maybe a month, it shows up, and you become accustomed to asking yourself, man, I don't feel very secure here. I mean, it just happened to me yesterday. I was in another networking group, and for some reason I didn't feel very confident. I think I asked myself, why do I feel very unconfident with these people that I kind of barely know? I mean, I've known them for about a month, but I asked myself, well, because I joked, threw some jokes out, and nobody laughed at my joke. Every time everybody introduced themselves, and there was a small applause, but when I introduced myself, probably because I didn't throw a great joke out, there was no applause. So I felt like not secure is because I felt like there was no reciprocation and reaction in a positive way to some of the actions of way I'm bidding. And I'll talk about this later about bids for a relationship. So um, until a good friend acknowledged me and acknowledged something that I did, then I felt like, oh, I'm being acknowledged for being a person. So anyways, just this is a continual growth process of revealing your emotions and revealing about yourself that your head may not understand, but your heart does. So anyway, so expressing your feelings, understand your feelings, it helps to talk about it. Brene Brown talks about in terms of the power of vulnerability is that when people share vulnerably, and now we're talking about not just themselves authentically, but their shame, the things that you're afraid of, things that you're afraid that people will know. Those are the things that are required to have genuine connection. But um, how people receive your vulnerability, she has two TED Talks. How people receive your vulnerability determines whether or not you feel safe to share with them again. So, actually, even before I talk about vulnerability and sharing your feelings, there's something that I like to use, which is John Gottman's Love Lab. Talks about bids and respect. And his is focused on marriages and couples, and basically put the couples in a love lab. And basically, within 5 minutes, he knew there are masters and disasters, which basically means masters that would last in marriage, and there's disasters that he knew that in a couple of short years that they would divorce. And one of these things he talks about is bids. And so, what is a bid? A bid is a a bid for interaction and to build relationship. So, any question that you ask somebody, like, "How are you? What is this?" You know, "Hey, look at this my new phone." That's a bid for interaction. Now, the person who receives it has four responses. Three are negative, and one is positive. So, negative response could be like, "Why are we talking about this phone? Like, that's not something I'm interested in." So that's a negative response. Another one would be like totally ignoring it. Like they'll they'll say, "Oh, that's nice," and then move on because there was a reason why I brought up the phone. There's a reason why, and so you would have to ask yourself, like, okay, why would you talk about that? Tell me more about that. Another response would be just totally ignore it, which is like not even respond at all, zero. So the only positive response, and I already hinted at it and I talked about it, is, "Oh, interesting. Tell me more about it. Why did you bring that up?" So that leads into more conversation. So these bids happen throughout the day, hundreds of times. And what John Gottman says is that 80% or more of these bids have to be in a positive reaction, has to be accepted for somebody to feel safe, for somebody who feels like they're respected. Anything less than 30%, then what that means is that that relationship will probably show either there's disrespect or there's something in the relationship that's not positive. Anyway, so that's the bid part of it. And then when I talk about safety is some people can share vulnerably without having a safe environment. They can just talk to other people. They are naturally like that, maybe extroverts. But most people, they need a safe environment. And this leads into another psychological, a psychologist I like is Marshall Rosenberg. This is nonviolent communication. And he talks about 9 basic needs. And basically, the 9 basic needs are some stuff like safety, sustenance, autonomy, those kind of things, play. So he talks about 9 basic needs, and he says that if these 9 basic needs are met, then we feel satisfied. So our emotions would have experienced some sort of emotion like joy, pleasure, comfort. But when these 9 basic needs aren't met, then you start feeling maybe nervous or jealous or angry or sad. So once again, these emotions are symptoms of something going deeper in your heart. So back to my example in terms of yesterday, I was throwing out bids. It wasn't getting accepted in a positive reaction that I was expecting. I felt unsafe. I felt like I wasn't accepted, and I felt in a feeling of uncomfortableness. So one quick example of these 3 different types of psychological actions at play in my life. So that's number 3 in terms of 5 regrets of the dying. Number 4, I wish I stayed in touch with my friends. This is about relationships. This is about things that really matter in life. Once again, relationships and friends. Some people have memories they built with friends and they miss that. Being with other community, it's a need for all of us, no matter if you're an extrovert or an introvert. Introverts still need community. They might probably need a less of a social circle, or introverts just need to recharge after meeting so many people. It's not that they don't need it. We all need some sort of community or tribe that we feel accepted in, part of a group identity. And then number 5, I wish I let myself be happier. So this is an interesting one. And happiness, what is happiness? And I love to refer to Arthur Brooks. He's a Harvard professor who recently wrote a book with Oprah Winfrey. So he must be doing something right, I guess, or maybe something wrong, depending on your perspective on who Oprah Winfrey is. But basically, what is happiness? And most people, when he asks his students, most people say, "Oh, it's the feeling I get when I'm with somebody." But he says, "No, that's not happiness. That's like the example he gives is like smelling a turkey at Thanksgiving. It's like happiness and the feeling of pleasure is maybe the evidence of happiness, but it is not happiness. And so he delves into, and this once again goes into what I believe is also is emotions are not reality. Emotions are a symptom. So he's basically saying the same thing that I'm saying, what I believe and other psychologists said is that emotions are something, a symptom going on in your heart. And he specifically targets happiness is, am I happy? Do I feel happy? Do I feel comforted? Do I feel joy? That what he's saying is that that feeling is just an evidence, but it's not real happiness. And he goes into three different areas to attribute happiness. One is enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose. So, what does he mean by that? Enjoyment is more than just pleasure. So, what he says is pleasure is like when you eat chocolate cake and you get that dopamine hit, you feel good about that. But if that was all happiness was, then everybody would be doing hits of cake and chocolate and heroin and drugs or whatever it is just for that in pleasure. But he's saying that it has to be more than that. And so what he's saying is you have to do something with pleasure with people and creating memories. That's one aspect of enjoyment is doing something in community that you like doing and creating memories with that people. That's one. Number two, satisfaction. What is satisfaction? Is accomplishing something, but not just accomplishing something, doing it through struggle. So just getting a prize by not doing anything, you're not going to appreciate it. But when you accomplish something and you struggled for it, you had conflict to it, but you were able to succeed and win, let's say, then you appreciate that gift more. So that's satisfaction. Let's say like climbing Mount Everest or getting through school, graduating, even writing a paper or something that took you a long time to write, something like that. So that is satisfaction. And the third is purpose, which is meaning. He asks these two questions, which is, why are you alive? And number two is, are you willing, what are you willing to die for? So with number one is, why are you alive? I told most people there's two ways people take that. One, if you have a belief in certain religion, it's the idea is why you're alive because God, divine, had created me. Or number two is some sort of divine purpose, like I'm doing this to do something at the end of life. Or number three, and then are you willing to die for something? And that goes into legacy in terms of, are you going to do something that outlasts your life? And Tony Robbins talks about that too. Talks about like, I wish I did something that was bigger than myself, was bigger than my life. So that's purpose. And it goes back to, Bonnie's fiber gets to die and wish I let myself be happier. Well, it's because people sacrifice their self-enjoyment or happiness for other people. And these are all tied together. They're all interdependent on each other. And so why was there a great resignation? I would say is because people don't want to do things without meaning. People want to do something that they really believe in. They align with their culture, aligns with their values. And another quote I love to quote is, when people join a company, they join because of vision. So they believe in the purpose of the company, but most people leave because of management, poor management. And so this is why leadership is so important, is because people have experienced poor leaders, poor managers. And poor managers is because I really believe is that these managers don't understand themselves and they react and try to control rather than giving people authority and autonomy, which is still a 9 basic need for people to make decisions and be able to do things that they need to do. Anyways, I think that's it for now. That's just a short idea. I'll go more into it in another one. So thank you. Something to think about, and anything else that comes up to mind, I'll bring it up. And I'll try to delve deeper into leadership aspects. Thank you.